The city of Mumbai never truly slept. The streets were alive with honking cars, flickering neon signs, and the hum of the metropolis. But inside St. Mary's Hospital, a different battle raged. The battle between life and death. Aisha Khan, a 28-year-old nurse, had spent the last 5 years dedicating herself to the hospital. She had seen tragedy, pain, and miracles unfold before her eyes, but nothing could have prepared her for the night that would change her life forever. The emergency doors swung, open with a loud bang. 2 paramedics rushed inside, pushing a stretcher with a frail young girl. She looked no older than 10, her face covered in dirt, her body trembling. Blood stained her hospital gown, and her fevered eyes flickered between consciousness and unconsciousness. Her breathing was shallow, her small fingers twitching in distress. "She was found alone on the streets," said one of the paramedics, out of breath. "No ID, no family, just a scared little girl." Aisha rushed forward, her heart clenching at the sight of the child's fragile frame. "Get her to the pediatric ward. We need vitals, blood work, and an immediate IV drip." The doctors moved swiftly, inserting an oxygen mask over her face, hooking her up to monitors, and setting up an IV line. Aisha watched anxiously as the machine beeped with fluctuating heart rates. But something felt wrong. There was an air of secrecy surrounding this case. The usual protocol was missing. There was no police presence, no paperwork, no one searching for this child. It was as if she had simply appeared out of thin air, like a ghost. As the night deepened, an eerie silence filled the hospital corridors. Aisha couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. Then, something even more alarming happened. Late that night, as she walked past the hospital's restricted entrance, she overheard 2 shadowy figures whispering in hushed, urgent tones. She saw too much. "The boss said she won't last another day. But what if she does? We can't take chances." Aisha's blood ran cold. They were talking about the little girl. A wave of fear crashed over her. Who were these men? Why was the child a target? Aisha knew she had to keep a closer watch over her. She stationed herself beside the girl's bed, watching as her chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm. The girl, whom she had now named Zoya, was a mystery. She barely spoke, her eyes darting around in fear, flinching at sudden noises. But her gaze was deep, haunted, holding the weight of untold horrors. One night, Aisha gently held her hand, offering a warm, reassuring presence. "Zoya, you're safe here," she whispered. "No one will hurt you." Tears welled in the girl's eyes as she finally spoke, her voice barely audible. "They killed him, I saw them, and now they want me gone too." Aisha's heart pounded. "Who, Zoya? Who are they?" Zoya shook her head violently, her lips pressed into a thin line. She refused to speak further, her small body trembling under the hospital blanket. Aisha knew that whatever the girl had witnessed had left an unshakable trauma. But it also meant she was in grave danger. Determined to find answers, Aisha sneaked into the hospital records room the following night. The dim glow of the monitor illuminated her face as she searched for Zoya's file. To her horror, it was empty. No medical history, no personal details, just one chilling line. "Critical. Keep under strict observation." That wasn't normal. Every patient, no matter their condition, had records. Aisha's fingers flew across the keyboard as she dug deeper into the hospital's internal database. Her heart pounded in her chest as the truth unraveled before her eyes. Zoya was the only surviving witness to a high-profile murder involving a powerful crime syndicate. The police had hidden her in the hospital for protection, but someone had leaked her location. Aisha's breath hitched. The assassins were already inside the hospital, waiting for the right moment to strike. Her hands trembled. Every second that Zoya remained here, her life was at risk. The little girl had no family, no friends, just Aisha, a nurse who had sworn an oath to protect lives. Zoya wasn't safe here. She had to get her out. She spent the rest of the night watching over Zoya, unable to rest, every creak of the hospital floor making her heart race. At one point, she thought she saw a figure lurking outside the glass window of the ward, but when she rushed to check, no one was there. Aisha could feel the walls closing in. Time was slipping away. Early the next morning, she devised a plan. If she could distract security and get Zoya out through the back emergency exit, she might stand a chance. But as she turned the corner near the supply room, she suddenly collided with Dr. Sharma, the senior physician on duty. He looked at her with narrowed eyes. "What are you doing here at this hour?" he asked, suspicion lacing his voice. Aisha forced a smile. "Just checking on supplies," she lied, her pulse quickening. Dr. Sharma lingered for a moment before walking away, and Aisha let out a slow breath. She needed to be more careful. That evening, she noticed something even more disturbing. 2 unfamiliar men dressed as hospital staff loitering near Zoya's room. They weren't doctors. They weren't nurses. They were watching, waiting. The assassins were getting ready to make their move. Aisha's mind raced. Tonight was the night. She had to act now. As the minutes ticked by, Aisha carefully mapped out her escape plan in her head. Every hallway, every blind spot, every possible route of exit. She memorized them all. She knew she had to time it perfectly. A single mistake could mean the difference between life and death for both her and Zoya. She quickly packed a small bag with medical supplies, water, and a spare nurse's uniform to help disguise the child. Then, a thought struck her. What if there were more of them outside? What if the hospital was completely surrounded? Her breath quickened. She had to think smarter. A distraction, something to buy her enough time. Her mind raced through possibilities. Fire alarm? Too obvious. Power outage? Too risky. But then, she realized, if she could create chaos inside the hospital, the assassins might hesitate, giving her just enough time to slip away unnoticed, her hands clenched into fists. It was now or never. Aisha had no time to think. The weight of her decision pressed heavily on her chest, but she knew hesitation meant death. The hospital's long corridors stretched out before her like an endless maze, each hallway possibly concealing the men who wanted Zoya dead. The little girl's safety was now her responsibility, and she had no choice but to act. The dim glow of emergency lights flickered overhead as Aisha gently shook Zoya awake. "We have to go," she whispered, placing a reassuring hand on the girl's forehead. Zoya's eyes widened in fear, but she didn't resist. She trusted Aisha now, and Aisha couldn't let her down. The hospital buzzed with the soft hum of machines, distant murmurs of night shift staff, and the occasional echo of hurried footsteps. Aisha peered through the glass window of the ward. The two unfamiliar men were still there, leaning against the wall just outside the entrance, pretending to be part of the hospital staff. But their alert eyes, shifting glances, and stiff postures gave them away. They were waiting for the right moment to strike. Aisha's pulse raced. She had to create a distraction, but it had to be precise. No room for error. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for an opportunity. Then she spotted the fire alarm near the supply closet. If she pulled it, chaos would erupt, forcing security to scramble and creating the perfect opening for an escape. She turned to Zoya. "Stay close to me, okay? Whatever happens, don't let go of my hand." Zoya nodded, her small fingers gripping Aisha's wrist tightly. Taking a deep breath, Aisha slipped out of the room and into the dimly lit corridor. She moved swiftly, keeping her steps light, her breath steady. The hospital air was thick with antiseptic and tension. Every second felt like an eternity. Reaching the fire alarm, she hesitated for only a fraction of a second before pulling the lever down hard. Instantly, a deafening siren blared through the building. Red warning lights flashed as nurses, doctors, and patients jolted into action. Confused voices filled the air as people rushed to evacuate. The two men outside Zoya's room turned sharply. At the sudden commotion, their hands moving toward their pockets. Were they armed? Aisha didn't wait to find out. She grabbed Zoya's hand and ran. Dodging frantic hospital staff and disoriented patients, she moved swiftly through the hallways. Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear the footsteps behind her. They had noticed. They were following. She darted into the stairwell, pulling Zoya behind her. Downward, faster. The cold metal railing was slick with sweat as she gripped it tightly, taking the steps two at a time. Zoya struggled to keep up, but Aisha held her, firm. The little girl was panting, but there was no time to slow down. A gunshot rang out. A bullet ricocheted off the stairwell wall. Aisha ducked, shielding Zoya with her body. They were shooting now. They didn't care about witnesses anymore. Her mind raced. They had to disappear. Now. Bursting through the door leading to the back exit of the hospital, she was met with cold night air. The alleyway behind the building was empty, dimly lit by flickering streetlights. She sprinted forward, looking for a way out, her legs aching from the adrenaline-fueled escape. Then, she saw Ida's small ambulance parked near the loading dock, its back doors slightly ajar. An opportunity. Without hesitation, Aisha lifted Zoya into the back of the vehicle and climbed in herself, yanking the doors shut. She held her breath. Footsteps pounded against the pavement. The men had followed. Aisha quickly reached for a discarded lab coat hanging on a hook inside the ambulance, covering herself and Zoya with it. She pulled Zoya close, whispering, "Not a sound." The little girl nodded, trembling against her. Seconds felt like hours as the men slowed near the vehicle. One of them muttered, "They must have gone the other way." A tense silence stretched on before their footsteps faded into the distance. Aisha exhaled sharply. They were alive, for now, but this wasn't over. The men would keep searching. They had to get far away from the hospital, from Mumbai. They needed a real plan. Ayesha reached for her phone, hands still shaking, and dialed the only person she could trust, her childhood friend, Farhan, a former journalist who had a knack for uncovering the truth. Before Farhan could arrive, the silence was shattered by another sound, sirens and police cars pulling up outside the hospital. Aisha's stomach twisted. Had someone reported her missing? Or worse, had the men tipped off the police, framing her as a kidnapper? She couldn't take any chances. She had to move. Spotting a nearby fire escape leading up to an abandoned building, she decided to take a risk. Climbing onto the metal ladder, she lifted Zoya onto her back and began the steep ascent. Her muscles screamed in protest, but she kept going, gritting her teeth against the pain. The rooftop was eerily quiet, the city sprawling out below them. Aisha took a moment to catch her breath, then spotted something that sent another wave of fear crashing over her. One of the men was already on the rooftop, waiting. He smirked. "You're clever, nurse, but not clever enough." Before he could reach for his weapon, a loud crash erupted from the street below. A car had rammed into a police vehicle. Farhan. He had created a distraction. Seizing the opportunity, Aisha grabbed a loose pipe from the rooftop floor and swung it with all her strength. The man crumpled to the ground. Without wasting a second, she carried Zoya back down the fire escape and into Farhan's car. "Drive!" she gasped. Farhan didn't hesitate. The car sped off into the darkness, weaving through the city streets. The night was far from over, but for now, they had a chance. As the city lights blurred past, Aisha held Zoya close, whispering, "We're going to get out of this, even if it meant running forever."